one. So this channel is designed for all things women's health and women's kind of medicine in general, bringing women things so that they can show up the best in their life and show up as their best version of themselves. Our special guest today is Andrea Robinson, and she used to be a TV anchor here in the Scottsdale area, and since then has transitioned into an entire online community for women. So welcome, first of all.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. I truly, truly am. I love the title of the show. I love what you're doing for women and gathering them together to hopefully embrace this message so we can all move forward feeling confident and strong, because I think ultimately that's probably a goal for most women. It just takes a lot of us many, many years of working on ourselves to get to a point of true confidence. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. It takes time, and it's a work in progress all the time. Not every day's a journey.
I always say, I don't really think there is a level of mastery we get as women of being like, we are as confident and as strong as we'll ever be, because if we're truly growing, then we're always going to be evolving a little, changing a little. There's always going to be like a nudge of something in our heart to work on. And so I just don't think you ever just get to a point and think, yeah, I'm good here. I think you always want to keep working forward.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that is so important. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? Because going from kind of TV over to what you're doing right now is a little bit of a leap. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I was born and raised here in Phoenix, Arizona, which when you say that now to people, they're kind of like, really? Because, this is such a transplant type state now, everybody coming from different states and settling here. But I was born and raised here. I went to grade school here, high school here, and then went on to Arizona State University. And I had gotten a degree in communications. While I was there, I interned for the local Fox station. And I'm not, this is my little old lady dog.
You're good.
She's my partner in crime in here, so she's just going to make herself at home.
Perfect.
So I interned there as a 20-something. I was 20 years old, I think, when I got that internship, my senior semester, spring semester. And when you do an internship, it's not paid. It's kind of grunt work. But I was really intrigued, and I didn't know if I wanted to go into TV news, but I always felt like I was kind of called and led in that direction. It was just intriguing to me, and just how it was always put together. I love the fact that you got to share, stories of celebrities and everyday heroes and people in your community and just everybody. You were the voice for the community. And so that actually, which just doesn't happen that often, eventually turned into a very, very part-time job. And I was a traffic reporter for that local Fox station, our local Fox station here in Phoenix. And I always say, like, TV news people, budding TV news people that go into the business, I mean, you usually travel from market to market, small markets, kind of building yourself up to a bigger market. And early on in your career, there is no money at all. But I felt like my internship into that portion of my first, job in TV news was sort of like my hopscotch jump from smaller markets, because I think I made $10 an hour, and I worked 3 hours a day here in Phoenix reporting traffic for the 3 hours a day. And then I went on and had a full-time job. Mm-hmm. So that slowly turned into a full-time job. I went from, just traffic reporter to feature reporter on the morning show. And then that slowly evolved. And over the last 14 years, up until almost 2 years ago, I was the co-anchor for the morning show. And it was such a beautiful season of my life. And I mean, a pretty long career, especially women in TV news don't tend to last all that long. And not necessarily because we get booted out or anything. I think that we just really get this stirring in our heart for something different. And it is a very demanding job. There is no flexibility, very, very little flexibility. And so it's just, you feel that pull when you start to have a family, and then they start growing and you feel like you're missing out on everything. And that's sort of where I was towards the end of my career. I would say that last year and a half there is when I really felt this shift inside of me. And it was, I tried to I'm just annoyed with something, or I'm just tired. I mean, I woke up at 2:30 in the morning every single day for nearly 15 years. So, I mean, you think, okay, and raising kids, they're now in school and it's just harder. But I could not deny that the feelings kept coming up. And I knew if I dismissed them, I would probably sit feeling miserable longer than I really wanted to.
Mm-hmm. That definitely makes sense. I think it's common sometimes in women where you feel like there's an aspect of what you should do and an
Yes.
aspect of what you want to do.
Yes.
And I think women are particularly bad sometimes at people pleasing.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I always say I am in recovery. I am a recovering people pleaser. And I don't really think that will ever fully go away. Like, I mean, I love people and I love taking care of people. And sometimes I blur the line. Am I taking care of them, enabling them, or am I just wanting them to like me and, hopefully keep their opinion good of me? If I say no, what will they say? And so for me, I remember that last couple of years within my job when I was really trying to make this decision, will I stay or will I go? Because I kind of missed that part of the story. So my contract was nearing an end in September of 2018. So we have fairly long contracts. It was about 5 years. So I really needed to know, will I stay or will I go? Because if I stayed, I was going to stay for another 5 years. And I just couldn't, I really couldn't put myself in there happy for another 5 years. And that thought of my kids then 5 years later, they're going to be like well into school and I'm really going to miss a lot of stuff. And so that feeling of what will they think if I choose this and don't stay? I mean, here I was like, had climbed this ladder to get there. And in TV news, once you leave, you leave. Like you rarely get back into it. There's always somebody younger and they're not going to get paid, they don't have to pay him as much money and all these things. There's someone right there in the wings just waiting to swoop on in, which is wonderful. It's great, but you have to really be sure, like when you're out, you're out.
Yeah.
And so as I really started to figure out what this feeling was inside of me, I had started seeing a therapist because I wasn't happy and I didn't know how to make myself feel better. And, I placed the expectation on my husband that he would be that for me. Come on, fix me, help me feel better. And he couldn't do it. So when I had
job.
Yeah, I know, right? But I mean, we think they should be able to do that. And when I had started seeing a therapist, a lot of it was, rooted in, I wanted everything perfect and everything on the outside looked perfect. But on the inside at that moment was just it was so messy. My head was so messy. I wasn't happy, but I had created this illusion and I yearned for the affirmation and the validation from people. And that's what kept me going. Whether it was, I can't believe you can do all those things. You're like super mom. And every time they fed me that, it was like a little hit of a drug, right? Like, but it only lasted so long and then I needed it more. And so I did and did and did and did and kept doing this life that was so exhausting. But the fuel to keep going was them saying all this. And then I kept thinking, okay, what will they think if I say no to all of this and I bow out of all of this? And I remember the therapist once saying, perfectionism really is rooted in fear. And it's the fear of what people will think. It's the fear of not being good enough. It's the fear of somebody's opinion. And once you realize, like, if you can start working on, they're going to think something no matter what.
Yep.
And you start to lift that veil of perfection, you realize most of what you see that you think is perfect is actually super messy. It's just some of us are really good at making it look great.
Yep, definitely. And I think right now, specifically, this is like an interesting time to bring this up because I know that a lot of moms are struggling. They don't know what to do with their kids. They don't know what to let them do. Like, do you keep them in a bubble because then you're a good mom? Do you not? Like, do you take them to the dentist? The other day I had a patient in my office who was telling me, I don't know what to do. My kids' dental appointments are coming up and I have no idea what would be a good mom for me to do. Like, do I let their teeth rot out of their head or do I give them COVID-19? And, we had to have a conversation on the fact that both of those things aren't necessarily going to happen, but it's hard because there's so much judgment.
Oh, so much judgment out there. I mean, And I mean, mom shaming is a for sure thing.
It's a thing.
It is a thing. But what I know, every time I judge somebody, and any of us sitting here right now, like listening, I mean, if you're brutally honest with yourself, we all judge. We all, I mean, maybe in our past we were really bad and we judged all the time, and maybe we've grown a little bit, we've gotten better. But every time I judge somebody else, it's just revealing this deep insecurity inside of me. And so I always have to throw it back on me, like, why am I judging her? Why do I care if she takes her kid to the dentist? Why do I care if she wants to work a bazillion hours a week and still be a mom and go to all, like, what is that doing to my life? Like, if that's working for her, then that's great. And so that has, I mean, so much of, working with a therapist has really been key to unveiling those insecurities that were really deep inside of me. But I think all of us are like, could sit here and say, we really do, maybe at different seasons of our life have cared too much about what other people think. And then we sit with our doctor, or we sit with somebody and we want somebody to just give us the answer that would maybe give us less judgment from the public. And it's like, there's always going to be a judger. There's just, totally. You could be, I mean, you could be here and somebody will judge you. You can be here and somebody will judge you. You could be the Pope and you're still going to be judged.
Totally. Yep. And that's what I tell my moms, especially a lot, like, are you doing your best? That's all that matters. That's all it. That matters.
That's everything. And that's the thing, is like, our best is such a sliding scale every day.
Yeah.
Because some days my best is getting up and just like getting a shower and doing just the bare minimum to keep going forward. Mm-hmm. And then some days my best feels like it's marathon speed. It's just, and to really understand that every day can't be ran with this pedal to the metal, 100 miles an hour. And that's the life I lived for so long, because I thought that was the only way. Mm-hmm. Like, I have to keep going like this, because if I stop, somebody will think I'm lazy, or I'm not a good enough mom, or I didn't, I'm not trying hard enough. I'm not hustling hard enough. And I mean, it was just lie after lie after lie that I let sit in my head for so long. Mm-hmm. So to break free of that and unbecome what I was, and to work towards what I want to continue to be, has taken a lot of work. And I think that's always hard, right? You see people and you're like, what they don't, so often it's like that shift and change inside of you is never really noticed by people for quite a long time.
Definitely.
That work that you start doing to change. And so I think, even the work with the therapist, I was still working in TV, and I don't think it was really evident that there was this shift inside of me, but slowly, it came to that. And then come May of 2018, I went into my boss's office and I just said, I'm choosing, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for every opportunity. All of this has been so wonderful, but I'm choosing this next chapter, and I'm choosing to just be first present for my kids and not be this like shell of a version that they get at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what this will look like, because at the time, I mean, I didn't have this idea to then start this business and continue moving forward with a community of women and bringing women together. I didn't have that idea. I just knew right then and there I would stay stuck and unhappy if I continued doing what I was doing. Had nothing to do with the people or the job. It was just mm-hmm. simply me. And It was a hard decision, but I felt this immense feeling of peace, because my heart and my mind for once kind of came together and they both agreed, which is kind of rare. Like, when you make it's hard, especially when you have a big decision. It's like the logic is here and then your heart feels this, but for once they kind of felt the same.
Yeah. And that's an important place to be, because that does not happen very often, right?
No. So that's when I knew, I'm like, okay, God is absolutely like prompting me. There's something so heavy on my heart that if I ignore it, I'm missing something, and I might just miss the next door that is supposed to open. Because here where I was, the doors that had kept opening for that career just slowly shut, and they just new ones weren't opening. Yep. And so I just kept using that as, okay, this is just another affirmation of where I need to go.
That makes sense. And that's like a really good segue into your business, because it's you do you. That's your thing. You do you. And so tell us a little bit about that.
So it started, the business, it started with a journal. And we launched it in January of 2019. So I left in September of 2018. And I really wanted to just take time to rest because I still don't fully understand the idea of rest. And it's hard for me. It's one of those things it's a lie I tell myself. If I rest, I'm lazy, but it's not, it's not the case. I'm still working on that. But I rested for a little while, but I knew, that there was still to move forward. I wanted to be excited and passionate about something. And so my husband one night and I were talking about, well, what is it that you might want to do? And so we started talking. And during the time that I was transitioning out of work and seeing a therapist, I was journaling as well. Dear friend of mine, had gifted me a journal. It was a simple guided journal. I remember kind of taking it and like putting it to the side, like, I don't have time for this. I wake up at 2:30 in the morning. Do you even know? Like, no. And I never told her like I didn't start it, but I remember there was one specific day that I had just had the day that just really impacted me. Like all the emotions, just the sheer utter exhaustion hit me hard that day. And I was like, I can't keep doing this life. So in the midst of starting therapy, I remember the next day, I'm like, I have to do something different. Like, because what I'm doing right now, my mind is not feeling good. So I picked up the journal the next morning at 2:45 in the morning while I was sitting in my kitchen having coffee. And I just answered the questions. And they were like 5 simple questions, but very powerful. And 3 of them that always really stuck out to me that were, I think, the most impactful was, what are you grateful for? I mean, just simply asking yourself that. What are you going to do to make today awesome? Some intention behind the day. And the last one was, what do you love about yourself? And that one was always the one that hit me because I really honestly, because I think I acted as if I had this self-confidence and I had everything put together, but I really lacked confidence and self-esteem. And I didn't really, my worth, I tied it to everything else, but to just knowing that without all of this, I'm still worthy. So I remember writing the answer to that question. And every day I wrote the same thing. I think I wrote the same thing for months. And it was, I am a great mom and I am a loving wife. Because to me, I felt like I slacked so much in that department that I didn't believe that, but I wanted to love that part of me. I wanted to really believe I was a great mom and a loving wife. And so what happened, and this again, there's no like science background to this or psychology background, but at the time, our son, this was kind of just my theory behind it. My son was young. He was like 2 or 3 at the time when we started this whole idea of affirmations, positive affirmations. And my husband and I would tuck him in, and we basically started sharing with him affirmations. And eventually what he would do every night when we would go to bed, we would ask him, Carter, what are you? And he had come up with these affirmations. So every night it's, Carter, what are you? My name is Carter and I'm smart, funny, handsome, kind, and cool. And day after day after day. Did he memorize it? Yes. Did he repeat it? Yes. But that kid absolutely believed those things about himself. And to this day, he is exactly that kid. He is smart, funny, handsome, kind of cool. He marches to the beat of his own drum. He is just a kid. I mean, he's just an amazing kid. And I thought, if that would work for him, why can't that work for me? If I repeat it enough to myself, I'll start to believe it. Now, it might take longer because I have all this stuff up in my head from so many years of somebody said this to me. I don't believe this about myself. This is a lie. So you have to uncover all of that and push that out. But it started to work because eventually I started to really believe that I actually was a really great mom. And I'm a great mom because I'm the mom that God picked for those kids. And that's what makes me great for them. I might not work as a great mom to some other kid, but to them, I am just great. And same with, being a loving wife. So that question was like one of those. So journaling had become such a big part of just sort of this process of change. And so my husband was like, well, I don't understand why couldn't you make a journal? And I was like, I guess I could. I don't know how, but Google might know how. So I started researching how to make it. We had, my husband's in the online space as well as his second job. And so I connected with some wonderful friends of his that are really great in the online space, but also in e-commerce and physical products.
Mhm.
And so we created it. We did it, my way. There was parts of the journal that I used to use that were just kind of like I would skip or not use.
Yeah.
And so I made it the way I wanted it. I, created all of the motivation and the quotes and everything in there. And we launched it in January of 2019. And so that was the idea was, okay, if something like simple like this could help a busy woman, which everybody's busy, nobody has time in the morning. Everybody says, well, I don't have time for that. I can't do that.
Yep.
If the girl at 2:30 a.m. can do that, then anybody can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but a bigger part of it and what it's really become now is, yes, we have products and things like that. And the journal is, I always say, the little journal that could, but it really has, the bigger goal is we've created this community with these big open arms.
Mm-hmm.
And we are a place where women can come and take off their masks and feel seen and heard and feel their worth in there and feel like they can be authentic in themselves and be empowered to hopefully feel love and encouragement and support. Because so many of them, what I found is they think they're walking this journey alone. They think that their story's the only one, so they're afraid to talk about it. And they feel the shame of like, I can't do this all. Nobody could understand. And when they're in a safe place that's built on a foundation of love, encouragement, support, I mean, their mouths can open up, they can speak, they can share their hearts, and they can feel what it feels like to truly be heard and to truly be loved for who they are without any shame. And so that's really what it's become. And it's like, it blows my mind that there are thousands and thousands of women now in this community that want that for their life. Because I feel like if we can figure out how to do our own heart work and really start to look at ourselves and relearn how to love ourselves, that's really when you can go out and love people better, because you can't love people when you don't feel that even about yourself. You're always going to be bitter and resentful or jealous or envious or whatever it might be. But if you feel confident in your own life and you feel deep gratitude for it, it's so much easier to cheer for somebody else. It's so much easier to love her and encourage her because you don't feel threatened.
Absolutely. And so it's interesting. So like the first thing that you mentioned was, what are you grateful for? The research on gratitude journaling is actually pretty wonderful.
Yeah.
Like for anxiety and depression, just writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day really does change things. And it's interesting. It was, so I treat some anxiety and depression in my patients. And I started in this like phase of having a few teenage patients that had anxiety and depression that were patients of like daughters of moms. And I realized that I couldn't help the teenage patients quite as well as I can an older patient. And I think it was because older patients, when they come in, like they really want to get better, like they really want to, and kids want to get better, but there's something different about it. And it's interesting. My moms, I'm like, okay, gratitude journaling, and they always look at me like I'm crazy, right? And I tell them, okay, write down things you're grateful for every day. Try to make them different things. So don't cheat and write down the same thing every day, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. And they're happy to do it. My teenage patients, oh man, they looked at me like I was just the most insane person you've ever met.
Yes.
None of them did it. I was like, okay.
And that's interesting. And I don't know. I mean, I always think, my gosh, if I would have known that way of thinking or that tool then, like, I just think the work, almost like the backwards work we have to do as grown adult women would be different and maybe less. But I also think there's something to be said about younger people kind of feeling a lot of those things and having those experiences. I mean, I hate the fact that they would go backwards and then rework, but I think so much of who we end up becoming is because of who we were and maybe experience that shaped us in that way. But it is, I mean, gratitude, it's like the most underused tool that's free that you can't like over medicate on. You can't overdose, like nothing, right? And I love that you say you prescribe that, because some people I think get caught up and I have to have this like fancy morning routine and meditate and this and that. And I have to
Mhm.
journal stack to here and I got to be in like this quiet corner. It's like, no. Do you drink coffee? Do you drink tea? Do you have something in the morning when you wake up? Water, hot water, whatever. Okay. So you probably sit. You're probably not like chugging it, walking around the house. So if you sit long enough to enjoy that,
Mhm.
you've got time to write down what you're grateful for.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it is, I think like I teach a gratitude journaling class to women once a month. And I always say, I mean, be grateful for everything in your life, like big things, your family, your health and all that. But if you can get in the habit of practicing looking for really small little things, like if you're sitting outside and you're like, oh my gosh, the bird, I can't stop, that bird is chirping and it's beautiful and it's singing, or the sun, I got to see the sunrise, or the crisp air on my face today, or that first sip of coffee, these little things. Because again, little things are of course always the big things, but there will be a time in life, and I don't mean this to sound like, we will all go through something, and many of us will go through many things depending on seasons and chapters of our lives. And if we only focus on the big things, if for some reason the big things are threatened, have changed, or you all you were grateful for is your job all the time, you held it to up to here, and then all of a sudden there was something that rocked it, and maybe you were furloughed, or your job, was shut down, or whatever it might be. If you're always forcing your mind to see all of the little things and all the good, it's abundant. It never ends. There's like good to go around for days. It
Yep.
just
Absolutely.
practice to do that. And so I always say, write the big things, but please look around, because the little things will truly bring joy that like is never ending.
Yes, and I love that. I think that's so important because I do think that people get caught up in like a few things that they're grateful for, but you kind of have to look outside the box sometimes and
Yep.
like figure out some those things that you don't see, right? So that's awesome. Is there anything else that like has come up since you started the community that you weren't aware of that you were like, oh my God, this changed my life?
Well, I think I didn't really I wasn't fully aware of how important it is to have a community.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe even if I'm honest, probably took for granted. I feel blessed that most of my life I've had, and it's shifted, right? Because life changes and maybe your community shifts a little bit. But we've always had solid communities in our life, as a married couple, but even when I was younger. And right now, especially what we're in right now, which we're coming out of a little bit, I saw the beauty and the immense need for community. And I was so grateful because, our community, it's local, but we have women all over, the world within the community. But every month we have a meetup. And so we physically get together. And I mean, nothing can replace that. I think being with people and sharing a hug and seeing somebody talk and hearing their story like in person in a space, nothing can replace that. We obviously had to get creative over the last couple months, and we virtually met and came together, but so many of them would get in our online community and say, oh my gosh, like I can't, this day is awful, my job is threatened, this and that. And they're like, this is the only place that I can go right now, that I can share all of this hardship that's in my heart and on my mind, and feel like lifted up, encouraged, and like almost get fueled up so I can keep going, because this is really hard for me right now. And I think so many times we probably, and I probably have had these moments as well, where we think we can do it alone, where
Yeah.
we're like, I don't need help. And, or maybe you've had friendships that have gone south and you're like, this is exactly why I don't need people or friends or a community, because they just hurt me. And I think without a doubt, if you stop at that one time that you were burned, or the one time, it wasn't authentic, they didn't show up for you, it's like you closing your heart off for anything good that can come in the next step you take. And if you just keep prying your heart open, not everybody is going to be like that. And chances are there's so many people out there waiting to embrace you and pull you in to their community, because they need you. They need your voice. They need your spirit. They need your heart,
Definitely.
your story. And that's what I've seen is these women coming together, this community of loving, amazing women. And within there's these smaller subset of groups, they live in the same neighborhood and now they do their own little meetup, or these ones are doing a Bible study once a week now. And it's like, they're finding their people that God always wanted them to have. And I just don't think that we were ever supposed to live this life alone. We were always supposed to meant to walk forward with people. It's
Yep.
scary when you're alone, but at least if you have somebody pouring confidence into you and saying, okay, you might not be brave today and can't do it, but I believe in you and I'm going to help lift you up, and I'm going to, if I have to hold your hand, walk with you forward because you're going to do this. And that's what I think so many of us women, either we don't have or we're afraid to do for somebody else, or because we don't love ourselves enough, we can't encourage somebody else to keep going.
Yes, definitely. And I think a lot of that is the insecurity that we talked about earlier, right? When you can't kind of pour into others.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because I think there's a lot of times where women almost like try to be too brave. Like they're like, I don't need any help. I got that. I got it,
Yep, I got it. Or how are you? Oh, I'm good. And I'm like, are you good?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm good is the worst way to answer that question with me, because I will pry and I'll be like, really? Tell me what's so good. And then we really get going and we get talking. I'm like, okay, it's not exactly what you said. And you really just need, so often people aren't used to somebody asking, how are you? And then actually sitting there and saying, no, I want to know more. Like, tell me more.
Yes, definitely. Because we're used to very superficial things.
Yeah.
Right. Very superficial conversations. And I think that's important. If you're in a transition or going through kind of like a not great time, because it's been a little bit challenging opening up to people and having the conversation and being authentic and saying, no, like things are crappy.
Yeah.
Like that's okay.
That exactly. And I think the more I've seen in the community, when, especially myself, in TV, I didn't feel like I could completely be 100% honest of how I felt some days. Now I can be 100% honest of how I feel. And when I do that, oh my gosh, like the amount of women that come and say, thank you. Like, I feel like I'm not alone. And I'm like, the greatest thing you can say to somebody is, you're not alone in this. Like the minute they hear that, they feel like, okay, I'm not the only one struggling.
Yeah, definitely. And I think kind of to leave our people watching at this point, if there's something that's you're struggling with, I think gratitude journaling and writing down just 3 things you're grateful for is like an excellent way to start. Just force yourself to do it every morning.
I do. And I
end up on something that like,
it
resembles a book. I don't care. Do a napkin. Doesn't matter.
Exactly. I'm like, even if you just open the notes on your phone, I think that actually a pen to paper is always the best way. But if that is too much of a first step, open the notes of your phone, because chances are you're going to open that phone eventually when you first wake up. But I always say, before you do it, don't open social media, don't open your email, don't start filling your mind with what everybody else is doing, or your boss needs you to do this, or the school called and they need this from you, because all of a sudden you'll be overwhelmed and you'll get stuck and you'll be falling into this rabbit hole of comparison if you see what she's doing, and all of a sudden everything in your life sucks and you don't have anything to be grateful for because your mind just went to, she's got more and I've got less.
Yes,
so
definitely.
First things first, you owe it to yourself to spend a few minutes. And I mean, sometimes it's like, I always say little steps. If you can't, committing every single day for many people is hard. So every other day, or okay, I like to sleep in on Fridays, weekends, I'm not doing it. So I'm going to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, any bit of consistency that you can start with, you're going to feel an effect eventually.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. And I think that the other thing for women is just giving yourself a little bit of grace.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Sometimes like a little grace goes a long way.
And I think grace gets a bad rap because one, it's really hard to, for a lot of women, I think we can give grace to other people. It's just, we're our harshest critic and we're so hard on ourselves. But I think sometimes people think grace is a cop out, or it's easy street, or it's like, I'll give myself grace because I didn't get to the workout, or I didn't eat healthy today. And it's like, okay, like again, perfect doesn't exist. Okay.
Mhm.
Perfection is a race you'll never win. And it's like the destination, the finish line, you just keep running and running and you exhaust yourself because it isn't there. But
Definitely.
grace along the way, you start to one, feel more joy on that side of the journey.
Mhm.
And when you give yourself grace, okay, so I didn't eat perfect, but I made good choices today.
Mhm.
That's grace, you know?
Yeah.
Or I did spend an hour working in my business today. That's grace. I also showed up really well for my kids. So when you start to look at all that you did do and all that you are instead of everything you didn't get accomplished, that's grace.
Definitely. And I think that that's really important. And I think that the minute you start giving yourself a little more grace, you also give other people a little more grace.
Right? You look at the woman that you were kind of like eyeing or a little judgy, and you're like, okay, well, maybe she didn't make it to the school for that because she got stuck doing something else and she's trying, maybe she's a single mom and she's working
Yep.
full time and trying to do the mom side of things. Like, give her some grace. But sometimes we're so quick to judge, and then the grace card feels like, I don't want to give that out. I always say give them out like they're candy. Just give them out because you will need it sometime, and you'll really love when somebody else can say, it's okay. Like,
Yes.
it's okay.
Yep, for sure. Awesome. So, how can people find your community and what you're doing?
So you can go right to our website, AndreaRobinsonTV.com. There you can, obviously, we put new content up every week. Our community, you can find us right there. You can join our squad right there. If you're not on Facebook and you don't really love Facebook, there's many other ways for us to stay connected. I call them Friday coffee dates. Which are our email dates early in the morning. There's always some sort of encouragement I send out in story form, kind of long form.
Mhm.
So lots of ways, but AndreaRobinsonTV.com is the best way to see what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think a lot of women just sometimes need to hear the little things that can push you forward.
Well, I appreciate it, and I loved being here with you. So thank you so much.